Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first part of the AAF Coffee Break series. Today, we'll be talking to Brian Minahan, who is the Orchid Consortium lead for the Global Consortia. Now, Brian, good morning and welcome to our chat. I hear you've just recently moved from Hong Kong to Hawaii. How's it been? How's the process? Is it good?
Good morning, Melro, and thanks for having me. Yeah, so I've just left Hong Kong and moved to Hawaii, so now finally settled. Good to be back on the same sort of working hours with you again, and pleased to be here. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. And what about the time zone? I mean, is it still comfortable, or do you have to keep really strange hours in order to work with a few of us in the Asia Pacific?
No, we generally have the same hours. The trick is I am one day behind you because I'm on the other side of the date line there. So that is the only trick. So it's still Monday for me.
Cool, that sounds good.
Or whatever day.
If you got work done yesterday, you will literally be doing it yesterday for us, won't you?
Yes, I knew you would say that. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Thank you once again for joining us. Now, what I would like to ask you is, the reason we're trying to do this is we'd like our members to see a lot more value from their consortium membership. And we've got about 38 of our 42 members in the consortium who've done an Orchid integration. And what would you say members need to do to get more value out of their Orchid membership? I mean, is the integration enough, or is there anything else that they would need to do?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And every institution that integrates with Orchid should be asking themselves that, because then the question is, well, where do you stop? When are you done? Well, your institution's always changing, right? So, okay, now you may have started with your evaluation and reporting process of wanting to know exactly which authors were doing what, and the name disambiguation process may have played a basic part in that. But once you've moved beyond authentication, then the question is using Orchid to enrich data. So asking your researchers to give away that read limited ability, so you can ingest their Orchid record, and then in an advanced format, adding data that they may not have in their Orchid to their Orchid record, thus helping the infrastructure of research.
Cool. And what about funders? I mean, do funders have an important part to play in this? Can they also get a lot more benefit than just the simple integration, see a lot more value?
Yeah, good question. So of course, funders are also going to be looking for analyzing and reporting in their basic function. So there is also a bit of advanced work that they can do to move beyond. As you may know, a lot of funders have the basic step of having researchers sign in via Orchid, which is helpful. But in large terms, when they add data back to Orchid, say funding data that they know about, this is what really enriches Orchid and makes their experience and the researchers' experience of interacting with Orchid much more beneficial.
Cool, that sounds really good. Now, what I wanted to ask was, do you have any examples for us about what is happening internationally, what is happening within the Asia Pacific region that we can take and learn from?
Yeah, good question. Well, a use case of that where a funder is actually adding data back to Orchid is New Zealand, the Royal Society of Te Aparani. They do add credit for panelists that review activity for grants. So there are researchers that have given up their time and effort for being a panelist that have that unique kind of work in their research present in their Orchid record. I mentioned the basic aspect of having researchers sign in via Orchid. We know that NHMRC has started in the last couple of years of having researchers sign in, and that activity is generally grows quite a bit in the last 2 years. Similar to very large American funders like the NIH, you can just see very, very large growth there. Additionally, one of the curious things about funding agencies is they very often don't have a tailor-made out-of-the-box system that they can work with. But this is starting to change. Yeah, there's a funder in Ireland, the Irish Research Council, which has just implemented a Canadian system called Smart Simple. Smart Simple is a system tailor-made for funders to track evaluation and reporting easily. So there's some interesting developments in that regard.
Cool. All this sounds really good. Brian, one thing I wanted to ask was, I've heard some stuff about Crossref and the work that they're doing with funders. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Sure. Crossref, a lot of researchers don't know what Crossref is, but they're a very important part of the research infrastructure. So they are helping funding go into Orchid, and how they do this is with something called a FundRef ID. But generally, they played a really big role in populating Orchid through the publishers. So I mentioned that academic institutions and funders in self-interest just want to make their reporting and analysis easier, and that's true. And then if they add info back to Orchid, that makes it a more robust experience. The same is true with the publishers, but publishers often don't do this. They rely on an agency called Crossref, who is the one who creates DOIs. And Crossref will put your works into your Orchid if you, of course, allow them. And Crossref is the source of an enormous amount of data in Orchid. So their endeavors in having funding objects go into Orchid is very exciting, and we'll see how that goes in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for all these examples, Brian. And now what we'll do is we'll go on over to live questions from our audience. Still don't have any questions. So what I wanted to ask was, could you tell me, look, what we've been doing is we've been sending out information about the member reporting dashboard to our members within the consortium. So could you elaborate a bit more on the member reporting dashboard? What are the benefits for members, and how they can, what's the best way they can use it, as in how is it useful? I mean, what was the thinking behind developing the member reporting dashboard by Orchid? So
yeah, that's a good question. This is a new aspect that Orchid offers members. So, you know, previously, if you wanted to find anything out of that huge bank of data called the Orchid registry, you had to kind of query either using the API or maybe the public data file, which is offered annually every October for Open Access Week. But this is pretty cumbersome, and it requires a lot of technical searching each time for every single query. So the thinking behind the dashboard was to have an interface available to member institutions so that you could be able to answer those questions. One of the most common questions is, how many researchers at my institution have an Orchid ID, and who are they? Which is a fairly obvious question. So now this dashboard is evolving to where those type of questions are really available just through a different interface. It also allows easier it makes the ability to tell your your vice presidents, your deans and things, what's going on at your institution, and just make reporting generally easier.
Cool. Thanks for that. And we've got a question over here from Aaron. And what Aaron's asking is, does DataSite have an Orchid integration like Crossref?
Yeah, they do. They have a pretty active integration. They're also a big contributor of data into Orchid. You may come across, so if you don't produce a lot of, say research data site or data sets and things like that, where you might come across them is, say, if you have an account on Figshare. So data and from Figshare can be put into Orchid from Figshare. So that's DataSite handles that transfer of research data via the DOI. So excellent question, Aaron. Yeah.
Thanks for that. And then we've got another question over here that says peer review is an integral part of the research process. Now, are there options in Orchid for researchers who also do peer review, and who adds that information into the Orchid record?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things that I think is so handy about Orchid in the last few years is that it's really trying to bring those parts of researchers' lives to the light of day. So peer review is one of those. Researchers spend a lot of time being reviewers for journals and publishers. The way, when this was first announced, a lot of people thought, well, wait a minute, what about anonymity or double blind processes and things like that. So these systems, the journals work with certain third-party systems to ensure that will be sent to Orchid without any identifiers, like which article or which thing in particular. So it would be like, during such and such year, I was a reviewer for such and such journal and things like that. And because those can only be added via that trusted third party, that makes it a bit more, shall we say, trustworthy, rather than me going into my Orchid and putting 50 review service things that are maybe a little bit not wholly truthful. Thank you.
Fair enough. Okay, and we've got there are another couple of questions. So we haven't made much progress in getting our researchers to write to Orchid. Has anyone else had much luck in this space, and are there any tips? So this is from Dimity Flanagan, and yeah, what they say is that they've got symplectic elements, but they haven't made much progress in getting researchers to write to Orchid. Now, when you say write to Orchid, I'm assuming your researchers haven't signed into the system and given permission to the system to be able to read or write to the Orchid record. Would that be correct? And if that is the case, then Brian, do you have any tips on how we could get researchers to sign into the system? I mean, what can be done to help encourage researchers, I guess?
Yeah, okay. So Dimitri's added that the researchers...
They've already done read. They need to re-authenticate to
okay.
write.
Yeah.
Okay. If you would like me to answer this, what we've done in the past is with regards to communication on such aspects, we get researchers, we'd communicate with a few researchers initially, those who would stand to benefit a lot from it, in that the option of having the system write back to the Orchid record, you communicate it in such a way where that yes, you need to give permission to be able to do to the system, but where you've already given permission in the first instance. But this time it is so that it's not just reading from the system, but also writing whatever research outputs the university has within its repository back into their Orchid record with the right metadata, and it's coming from an organization which has actually collected it, and it goes in with the right format. So that is one way we can approach this. More than happy to take this offline, Dimity, and have a chat with you and see on what else we can work with to try and convince researchers to do so. And I've got one last question. That's from David. And David asks, is the information between ORCID and ROR shared? For example, assigning one or several ROR IDs to a person's ORCID record.
Okay, let's see if I understand that right. So
I'm assuming over here that what David's asking is that if a person is affiliated with multiple organizations and all those organizations have ROR IDs, can all those ROR IDs be associated with that one person's ORCID record?
yes. Again, I'm not sure if I understand correctly. So through,
I am just going to see if I can get David to
Yeah.
actually ask his
Sure.
question live. All right, David, you should be able to ask your question live. David, do you want to ask your question? Oh, you're muted.
yeah, I think you're still muted. Okay.
Right.
Let me just kind of say, so a ROR is a organization identifier. So when you have a employment or education thing, oh, okay. Sorry. Are you able to unmute David there, Melra, perhaps? For affiliations, okay. Let's see if I can attempt to unmute David here.
I've tried unmuting David, but for some reason it doesn't seem to work. Let me see if this does. Right, no, it's not working. So yeah, I guess what David's asking is from an affiliation point of view.
Yeah. So let me just describe a scenario where, okay, so I'm at a university that will assert employment affiliations. They'll do that if they would use the ROR ID, which is the persistent identifier for an organization, then that metadata associated with that is collected by ROR. So what appears from that is from ROR. The other organization identifiers are similar. So GRID, I shouldn't mention GRID, Ringgold, and things like that. So those are the folks that collect the metadata and things. And so we generally rely on their metadata for a researcher that travels around their career. So myself, I've been affiliated with University of San Francisco, Hong Kong Baptist University, Innovative Interfaces, which is now owned by, I can't remember who, I think Clarivate or something like that, and then now Orchid. So all of those would be different ROR IDs in my Orchid ID, and assuming that all of them had Orchid integrations, then that would be permissible. I hope I'm getting David's question there. I'm sorry if I'm talking about something else.
So what I'll do is I'll touch base with David afterwards offline, see if that's answered his questions, and get back to you if it hasn't. That's all we have time for at the moment, because we are about 7 minutes past 10:15. So yes, thank you once again, everybody, for attending. We do hope that this series, the first of many, was informative. If you've got any feedback, please do let us know. If you've got any other questions that haven't been answered, send them to support, that's SUPPORT @aaf.edu.au, and I'll try and answer them, or I'll even get Brian to answer them, and we'll send it back through to you. But till we meet next, thank you very much, and
Yeah.
goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.
And thanks, Melroy. Yeah.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Brian. Bye-bye.